If we've said it once, we've said it 100 times. The biggest enemy to driver earnings in rideshare, whether driving for Uber or Lyft, is the lack of transparency. Simply put, there's a hell of a lot of misinformation and bullshit floating around. What up, folks? Once again, it is indeed your boy Tim with another ride sharing video. Now, this is fairly disturbing. This is something that is likely to frustrate many of my veteran drivers. Now, pick this up online. Comes to you from an article titled, "New Uber Tipping Scam. How Drivers Are Manipulating Riders for More Money." Now, there's two angles that this could easily frustrate many of us, particularly my veteran drivers. One, it's going to show Uber's greed and how they manipulate things from a tipping aspect. But what I'm more shocked with, and I think you will be too, is how little the public know. There's going to be a couple comments from some riders out there that is literally shocking the conscious. This is why transparency is so damn important. Nevertheless, the actual article continues by saying, when Uber launched, customers weren't supposed to tip their drivers. The drivers, the app promised, were paid well enough that the fare included the tip and the experience was seamless. Just get out of the vehicle. Now, any of us that have been driving since that era when you could not tip in the app, most of us remember having customers tell you what a tip is in the fare. That was bullshit from day one. Nevertheless, as the article will go on and state, they did pay drivers considerably better than they do now. When I started driving, I said in many videos, I was earning $2.20 a mile. Drivers in my market now make 72 cents to 75 cents per mile. So $2.20, you could certainly drive full time and literally make a decent income. At 72 to 75 cents per mile, you got to make a hell of a lot of choices to make that shit even be worth doing to begin with. But that is how Uber, not necessarily Lyft, because Lyft started out with tipping, but this is certainly how Uber started out, where you could not tip the driver if you wanted to, and they were telling the passengers that the tip was already in the fare. So that created the culture of no tipping that actually still exists to this day. But here's a little bit more on how Uber has simply made the problem worse. Drivers wanted to earn more, and Uber agreed to support tipping in the app, but because customers started paying more to drivers through tips, Uber reduced how much they paid to drivers. So in other words, the moment passengers actually started tipping drivers, Uber lowered how much the drivers earned to literally make it as if Uber was the one getting the tips. In other words, if you're getting $10 from the fare and the passenger tips you $5, you should get 15. But Uber would drop your 10 down a few bucks. So really, in reality, Uber's the one collecting the tips, or at least part of it. And the evidence is the fact that they've been sued and have actually settlements suggesting that they were stealing drivers' tips. This is nothing new. We've covered it in a host of other videos, but it is frustrating. It really is frustrating. And what makes it worse is the lack of transparency has made this shit carry on so that a lot of the riders are echoing some of this bullshit. And you'll hear that in the comments. Here goes. On a given ride, though, the more a customer tips, the more the driver will make. So drivers do want riders to tip. It's just that once that happens in the aggregate, Uber's compensation model adjusts. So they're saying exactly what I just stated. If a passenger tips, the algorithm that Uber has been known to drop the fare. Fact is, the tip shouldn't have a damn thing to do with any of the driver's earnings. Take a passenger from point A to point B, whatever the hell they were going to make should not be affected at all by what a passenger tips. But we have seen historically with Uber in particular, it has. It really has. Their effort to pay drivers as low as possible has even been extended into the fucking tips. If he gets tipped a lot, let us use that as an excuse to pay his ass less. This is what we talk about when we say transparency. You need actual laws, though. This is what Seattle, cities like Minneapolis are trying to do, Chicago, and New York, whereas the companies have to be transparent. Now, another reason why we're promoting transparency is because if the passengers knew what was going on, the comments I'm about to give you, this shit wouldn't take place. But these comments are disturbing, and even though I really hate the shit I'm about to read, fact is, the passengers, the riders have this mindset because they don't know what the hell's going on. At the end of the day, most drivers don't know what the passenger paid, and most passengers don't know what the driver is getting. So both parties are guessing their asses off. The drivers are guessing that the passenger paid a hell of a lot more than they're receiving, and the passengers are assuming that the driver's getting all the damn money that they're paying. In many cases, none of that is true. So, number one, there needs to be some sort of transparency so that everyone knows what the hell is going on. This would also have a big issue, a big deal in terms of tipping, because if the riders knew Uber was adjusting numbers and shit based on their tips, many of them would tip in cash. Some might actually even complain to the ride-sharing apps themselves. Why the hell are you changing his pay based on what I tip? There's nothing right about that at all. No passenger wants their tip to go to a Fortune 500 company or some bullshit like that. That makes no sense at all. It's the driver's car, the driver's time, the driver's taking a risk. The driver is covering all of the overhead. Why the hell would the company receive some of the tip? They're not doing a damn thing. But lack of transparency allows them to be able to do it without the person leaving a tip knowing that the shit took place. That's why I'm going to keep preaching transparency throughout this. Now, listen to some of the comments. As I promised earlier, some of this stuff is downright disturbing. Here's a guy named Gary. Listen to what he stated. Simple rule: never tip Uber or Lyft. As you state above, it is included. Same rule applies to hotel, housekeeping, pickup, food, self-serve machines, etc. Tips are already included. Why pay again? This is the bullshit that comes from the tip is in the fare. Here's an individual saying, why the hell do you need the tip? It's already included. And if you give them an actual tip, now you're tipping them twice. As he says, why pay again? This is flat out false. Now, this isn't an old article, folks. This shit was written yesterday. This is a February 20th, 2024 article. And the comments are dated. This just came in today. So there are riders out there that still believe when they pay a fare in rideshare, the driver is getting a tip through their fare. Transparency is going to come up again. There's a hell of a lot of trips that pay $3, $4. If the passenger knew that the driver's only earning $3.50 on this trip, all of this bullshit about a tip is in the fare would go away. The passenger may be paying $10 for that 2-mile trip, thinking the driver's getting 8 of it. Maybe $1 or $2 is part of the tip, and for 2 miles, the driver got paid $6. $6 for the 2 miles, $2 for the tip, the other 2 goes to Uber or Lyft. That's what an actual rider may be thinking with this tip is in the fare bullshit. But in reality, the rider may be paying $10 and the driver may be getting $4 of it. There's no tip in the fucking fare. Transparency is absolutely needed. But here's another disturbing comment from the same damn article. Don't like the job? Leave. Plain and simple. Americans out-tip in ways that the rest of the world simply can't understand. And in the process, we're once again putting our unwelcome stamp on others. Let's make no mistake about it. Americans don't fucking out. It's not that Americans are out tipping the rest of the world. That ain't the fucking problem. Problem is the jobs don't pay shit. Now, we're talking about rideshare, where the companies are reducing the pay to drivers based on how much they get tipped. But fact is, that's the American way in many industries. Restaurateurs, barmaids, a lot of those folks get paid less than minimum wage. They have had laws passed based on the fact that when a person goes to a restaurant, they tip 15-20%. So they've been able to lobby and have the laws drop down the person's base pay because they're getting tipped all the damn time. So which means the restaurants are kind of doing exactly what Uber's trying to do. If people are going to tip them, let us use that as an excuse to keep our money and pay them less, which essentially means that Uber is getting the benefit of the tip more than the driver. Or in the case of restaurants, they're actually getting some of the tips, which the restaurateur is not even guaranteed to get. You change how much I'm bringing in based on the fact that I get tipped. What happens when I don't get tipped? You're still paying me less, expecting me to get tipped. So that should never be in place. But unfortunately, Uber is trying to do just that. And because of the fact that there is no transparency, nobody fucking knows. But Uber, and now some drivers. The passengers think that the drivers are getting all the damn money. That's where this stuff comes from. Last comment. This one is a little bit better, but it's amazing that people still think this shit 10 plus years after ride sharing been out. The more you tip, the less Uber will pay drivers. That's what's already happened. As I say, on a given night, the driver is better off with a tip than without one, but the tipping regime benefits Uber, not drivers. And that is the whole point of the story, is that the more you tip the driver, the better off it is for Uber and sometimes Lyft, because they still have the ability to adjust the fare based on the tip. Until you get legislation or something of that nature to stop them from doing that, lock in what a driver should get for a trip, they're free to do this shit. This is what happens when you have little to no regulation. If you take a passenger from point A to point B, a set number of miles, there should be a certain amount drivers earn per mile, period. Or if you're sitting in traffic waiting, a set amount drivers earn per minute of wait time, period. The tip shouldn't have shit to do with that. If a driver's going to take a passenger from point A to point B and they earn $20 for the trip, and all of a sudden the passenger tips $10, it shouldn't have a damn thing to do with the fact that they earned $20. It should not give Uber or Lyft the right to lower the $20 because they received a nice tip. That is what is happening until we get transparency. That's what they're going to continue doing. Now, most veteran drivers are already aware of this to some degree. So somewhat this video is more for folks on the outside looking in, thinking that drivers are making a fucking mint, because that is the problem. Nevertheless, have you seen anything like this in your market where you feel confident a passenger left you a really nice tip and you looked at how much you earned for the trip, and it's as if the tip was all you earned? Let's say you get a trip that pays $5 and you get a really nice passenger that tips you $20. And all of a sudden when they get out of the card, you swipe that they're gone and the trip paid $22. And you thinking like, he tipped me $20. You're telling me this trip only paid $2? Because they've dropped the $5 down because you received a $20 tip. Have you actually seen something like that happen? As I stated, we know that Uber has paid settlements because they were still in tips. But have you seen it personally? If so, state your case. I would like to see that. That may actually appear in a future video, because it's a damn shame that they're able to get away with doing that. Anyhow, it's your boy Tim. As always, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.